This training video is brought to you by the Directorate of Agricultural Extension Services of the Ministry of Food and Agriculture with technical support from the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research. Maize and groundnuts form the basis of food and nutrition security for most farmers in Ghana. The benefits derived from these crops play a vital role in the livelihoods of rural farmers. Both crops are eaten by man and serve as rich sources of nutrients for animals. Despite the numerous benefits derived from these commodities, they are prone to aflatoxin contamination. Contamination of food crops with aflatoxins results in negative health impacts to both humans and animals. Furthermore, such food is prevented from accessing certain markets, resulting in economic losses. It also results in a loss in gross productivity. Aflatoxins may occur in crops in the field during growth or drying, and also in storage if kept under poor conditions. Aflatoxin contamination of food and animal feeds is therefore a major food security, food safety, trade, human, and domestic animal health concern.
Aflatoxin refers to secondary metabolites of a fungus that is known as Aspergillus flavus and another one called Aspergillus parasiticus. Secondary metabolite refers to products that the fungus gives out after it has gone through its normal life processes. Just like a human being breathing in oxygen and giving out carbon dioxide. So when we talk of secondary metabolites, we refer to products that a particular fungus produces or gives out after it has undergone its normal living processes. Unfortunately for human beings and animals, the secondary metabolites that are produced by A. flavus and then Aspergillus parasiticus is harmful to us. So it's called mycotoxin. Myco means it's coming from a fungus. Toxin means it's poisonous. In fact, previously in the early 60s or before the early 60s, nobody knew anything about mycotoxin or aflatoxin until some turkey somewhere in Europe were fed with grains that were contaminated with Aspergillus flavus, and they died in huge numbers. So research finally showed that it was something produced by the A. flavus on the grains that were fed that made the animals to die. Eventually, when the chemical was isolated, it was named aflatoxins. So the A is Aspergillus, the fla is flavus, and the toxin is poisonous. So that is the genesis of the name aflatoxins. The fungi that produce aflatoxins always want to live in sources that contains carbon and nitrogen. And most of the food products that we have contain carbon. Because of that, there are several crops that are affected by or that are attacked by the fungus, which eventually produce the aflatoxins. What are some of the crops? We have cereals. And when we talk of cereal, an example is maize, rice. You can also have millet. Legumes are also affected. Legumes, an example of a legume is groundnut. We also have oil seeds also affected. And then we also have processed products from animals, such as milk. But the major ones that are of worldwide health concern are groundnuts and maize. These two products are commonly affected by the fungus and its products.
This training video is brought to you by the Directorate of Agricultural Extension Services of the Ministry of Food and Agriculture with technical support from the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research.
Is it easy to identify Aspergillus flavus and Aspergillus parasiticus in the field and in storage? Yes. Fungus in general normally looks like cotton. So, when you find your grains with some kind of cottony growth, showing some yellowish, greenish coloration, then you are likely to be seeing Aspergillus flavus or Aspergillus parasiticus. Without the aid of a microscope, it will not be easy for you to tell the difference between Aspergillus flavus and Aspergillus parasiticus because they look very similar. However, each of them, and especially the A flavors, cause or produce the same kind of aflatoxin that we are talking about. So distinguishing between the two will not be easy for a farmer, but the fact that you could find those yellowish substances growing on your maize, which looks like cotton, then you know that you have Aspergillus flavus or Aspergillus parasiticus on your crop. Now, once the fungus is growing on the crop, it is procuring nutrients from the crop. It is picking up nutrients from the crop for its survival. And as it is surviving, it is undergoing some reactions in the body. And as it's undergoing the reaction, it releases some substances. Just like, as I said, human being breathing in or eating carbohydrates and eventually breaking it down to get energy. And sometimes releases carbon dioxide or water by urine. The same thing happens to Aspergillus. Therefore, every crop that you find Aspergillus flavus growing on is likely to have aflatoxin contamination. So the next question is, how does the fungus that causes aflatoxin infect the crops? The fungus known as Aspergillus can be found almost everywhere. They are in the air, the water, the soil, anywhere that they can find carbon source. You could find aflatoxin pathogen inhabiting the place. So on the field, when the spores of the fungus lands on the crop, then it can grow into the crop, start taking up nutrients, begins to grow and then multiply. And as it is multiplying, it is spreading on the field. So every crop that is infected by Aspergillus could have been infected from wherever it is coming from, either from the field or even in storage. However, Aspergillus flavus and Aspergillus parasiticus, they multiply rapidly when crops are in storage. But it does not mean that when your crop is not infected on the field, it cannot be infected in storage. Because if you have stored a produce in storage which had the fungus, and you didn't clean the place very well, but you rather sent another clean crop into that storage, the fungus will infect that one also. If you want to reduce the incidence of aflatoxin contamination in crops, your action should be directed both on the field and in storage.
This training video is brought to you by the Directorate of Agricultural Extension Services of the Ministry of Food and Agriculture with technical support from the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research.
What are the harmful effects of consuming crops that are contaminated with aflatoxin? For humans, it could lead to so many diseases with some huge names. But the bottom line is that it can lead to liver failure. Your liver will not function well. Or it will suppress your immune system so that any sickness that attacks you could eventually kill you. Your body will not be naturally able to resist other infections. In animals, even in human infants, in children that were fed with crops that were contaminated with aflatoxin, it retarded their growth. Some even died, and some they couldn't develop properly. So aflatoxin could be very harmful to humans. Aflatoxin is also carcinogenic. So in humans, it could cause cancer. So when you come to animals, studies have shown that aflatoxin can reduce the incidence of egg laying in poultry. It could also kill your poultry beds. And it can also lead to reduced milk production in cattle. So aflatoxin is also very harmful to animals. Now, what about the crops? Aflatoxin contamination, or the fungus that causes aflatoxin, its contamination can reduce the quality of the produce. So when the quality reduces, the farmer's profit margin will also be reduced because it cannot sell those produce. Worst of all, aflatoxin contamination can prevent export of some crops to some neighboring countries where their prices will be higher. So aflatoxin, apart from health implications, also has economic implications because it can cause a lot of loss to the farmer. So the fungus that causes the aflatoxin problem in crops could be found both on your field. Before you even plant, it could be there. During the planting, during the normal growth period of the plant, after harvesting, and during storage, the fungus can be found throughout those periods. Therefore, it is important that the farmer is taken through these steps to know how the fungus infect the plant at each of these stages. And in this training video, we would like to start from land preparation.
This training video is brought to you by the Directorate of Agricultural Extension Services of the Ministry of Food and Agriculture with technical support from the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research.
As said earlier on, contamination of maize and groundnut grains by the fungus that causes aflatoxin contamination can occur on the field, or normally occurs on the field, and then after harvest it is carried over into storage. Now, I would like us to look at some of the factors that contribute to the contamination in the field. First, I want to talk about land preparation. If land preparation is not done well, it predisposes the plants to contamination by the fungus. What do I mean by that? The fungus inhabits the soil and prefers to stay on the stubble, or if I say stubble, I'm talking about plant parts that are left on the field from the previous harvest. If the fungus is on those things, it will be very difficult for you to get rid of them on the field. So when you do proper plowing and harrowing, the leftover of the previous season's stubble decompose. And apart from adding humus to the soil, it also reduces the incidence of the fungus, which is the aflatoxin causing fungus in the soil. So the first step in preventing aflatoxin contamination is to do proper land preparation. The next step in preventing aflatoxin contamination is to select the right kind of seed. Normally, if you have seed that has been specially bred to resist a fungus, it is preferable to the local varieties that we have. So normally, a farmer must get his seeds from a certified seed dealer, and he must insist that he is giving seeds that has been proven to resist the fungus infection, and that is the first step. Number two, after the farmer has gotten the right form of seed, the next thing he needs to consider is the spacing. If the farmer spaces the crops so the spacing is too short, there is so much humidity in the field and the fungus will proliferate. However, if the farmer also decides to increase the spacing, there will be very few number of plants on the field and it will predispose the field to erosion. When that happens, most of the nutrients are washed away from the soil. The plants that you put on the field will suffer. And once they suffer, they will have less resistance to the fungus infection. So it is important that a farmer select the right spacing. Number three, the farmer should be able to give the plants the necessary fertilizer at the right stage, because if at every point in time the plants on the field are denied of good nutrients, including water, they will be less resistant to the fungus. So any fungus present will easily affect them, the plants. So, number four, the farmer should be able to plant at the appropriate time. For different places, there are different times of planting and harvesting. And this is normally dictated by the rainfall. So the farmer should be able to adhere to the conditions at the place where the farm is situated. For example, if the farmer knows that the drought season will be in a particular month, he has to calculate so that the plants will not mature during the drought period. Because during the drought period, the plant will lack a lot of water. When that happens, the grain formation or the entire plant will be less resistant to the fungus, because it will not have enough energy to fight against the fungus, which is the number one defense of the plant. So once the plant is stressed at that point where it doesn't get water, it loses the ability to fight against the infection. So it is very, very important that the farmer ensures that before the drought period will set in, he might have harvested his produce.
This training video is brought to you by the Directorate of Agricultural Extension Services of the Ministry of Food and Agriculture, with technical support from the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research.
After you have done the correct pre-planting activities and you have planted, the next important activities you need to carry out is proper husbandry practices. The first is that we must note that the fungus actually can easily infect the plant when the plant is stressed. So anything that you do that will stress out the plant will predispose the plant to the infection. As mentioned earlier on, there are some activities that are very important at this stage, because if you don't carry out those activities properly, the plants will become weak. And when they are weak, they are easily infected by the fungus. And that will lead to increased incidence of aflatoxin in the grains. The first thing I mentioned was proper fertilization, especially with maize cultivation. When you need to apply and the quantity that you need to apply and what type of fertilizer is very, very important at this stage. Number two, don't forget to water your plant continuously, because drought can predispose your plants to infection. So at this point in time, ensure that you water the plant as and when it is necessary. The third thing you have to do is, when you have to monitor your plants carefully so that the incidence of insects, pest infestation is brought to the minimum. Once the plants have started growing on the field, another important activity you need to carry out is pest control. And when I talk about pest, I don't just mean insect pest, but I also mean weeds and other type of fungus and even nematodes. So at this stage, you need to have enough information on how to control each of these, and you have to do it very well. Let's take the incidence of pest infestation. When you allow pests to infect your maize grains or even your groundnuts, they can bore holes into the grains that are developing. And when that happens, the fungus easily infects your grains. Especially if it comes to groundnut, termites could be a major factor in increasing incidence of aflatoxin contamination. So you need to make sure that you control termites very well on your field. And apart from termites, there are some insects that live in the soil. All those insects, you need to have enough information on how to control them, and they must be controlled. Weed control is a major activity that needs to be carried out in the field in order to reduce the incidence of aflatoxin contamination of groundnut and maize. In the first place, weeds compete with the crops for nutrients. And in most cases, the weeds are very hardy. So when they are not controlled, they take most of the nutrients and your plant suffers. And when the plant suffers, it loses the ability to fight against the infestation, and eventually it is infected. Secondly, the weeds harbor some insect pests, which can then jump on the weeds onto your crops, and they can destroy them. Therefore, when you reduce the population of weeds in your field, you definitely reduce the incidence of this insect pest. Another factor too is that the root of weeds can injure the groundnuts, the shells. And when wounds are created on the shells and even the grains, they are easily infected by the fungus. One major factor that leads to increase in aflatoxin contamination of maize and groundnut is poor harvesting practices. For example, in groundnut, farmers that use hoe can injure the pods during harvesting. And when that happens, the pod is easily infected. Also, if a farmer does not know the right moisture content or the condition under which the produce is matured enough, and he harvests very early or very late, it predisposes the crops to infection. For example, if you harvest very late, the drought period is going to put pressure on your crops. Apart from that, some of the shells, especially in groundnut, some of the shells will break, and when they break open, they are infected. When it comes to maize, you have to store maize at the right moisture content, because normally, after they have harvested, you don't need to go and dry them on the field again before you store. So you need to know the right condition or the moisture content at which you harvest. Prompt harvesting of maize or even the groundnut prevents further insect destruction on the field. It also prevents the plants meeting the drought period at the end of the season. Harvesting is another important operation which, when it's not carried out properly, can dispose the plant to infection. For example, a farmer harvests groundnuts, and because of lack of labor, the groundnuts are left on the field for a number of days. When that happens, the plant gets in touch with the soil that are already contaminated, the fungus. So the harvested plant is still prone to infection because at every point in the value chain, the crops are susceptible. So prompt removal of the harvested produce from the field is very, very essential. If for one reason the farmer is not able to remove all the pods from the field after harvesting, he should turn the plant upside down so that the pods will face the sun to reduce the humidity build-up around the pods. In terms of maize, the farmer should try and remove the harvested crops as soon as possible, because leaving them on the field, just like what I said about the groundnut, will also predispose them to the fungal infection. If possible, and the farmer has some time, he should begin the sorting of the pods and the crops right from the field, so that those that have problems, such as insect infestation, are not added to the whole ones. Because even during transport, it is possible for the fungus to be transported from one infected crop to the other one. So if the farmer is aware that some crops are infected, he should not add them to the bulk during transportation. And also, after the farmer has been able to separate the infected crops from the whole one, he should be able to dispose of them properly. By proper disposal, I mean the farmer should not leave the infected ones to be lying on the field, because when that happens, the fungus builds up in the soil, and the next production period, it will turn into a very big problem. Therefore, the farmer can dig a trench somewhere and burn all those infected crops. And mind you, aflatoxin cannot be destroyed by cooking. So a farmer should not separate the bad crops which are infected and take them home for consumption. It must be destroyed. Thank you.
This training video is brought to you by the Directorate of Agricultural Extension Services of the Ministry of Food and Agriculture, with technical support from the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research. Thank you for watching this video. For further information, contact the Directorate of Agricultural Extension Services.